The year is 1965. Senator Robert F. Kennedy is calling for a Christmas truce between the Vietnamese and American troops. This was considered a controversial move at the time. This call to action greatly inspired a family in the capital of Iowa, whose children's protest would alter the future of student rights and the responsibilities of schools as a whole.
The Tinker family of Des Moines, Iowa, was deeply rooted in activism, committed to social justice, peace, and civil rights. Leonard Tinker, a Methodist minister, was a vocal advocate for racial equality and anti-war efforts, using his position in the church to lead discussions on poverty, injustice, and moral responsibility. His wife, Lorena Tinker, was equally dedicated to activism as an educator who not only shaped young minds in the classroom, but also organized protests, advocated for improved women's rights, and promoted peace as a fundamental societal goal.
After the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, the Tinker family took part in a protest to honor the victims and advocate for justice. Mary Beth Tinker and her family participated in demonstrations mourning the deaths of the 4 African-American girls killed in the violent attack. As a family, they marched in solidarity, reinforcing their beliefs in nonviolent resistance, which played a role in shaping their later activism. Their home served as a hub for activism. The 6 Tinker children grew up in an environment where political discussions were the norm, and activism was a way of life. John and Mary Beth, in particular, were instilled with a sense of duty to stand up for what they believed in, seeing protest not as defiance, but as a moral responsibility shaped by their faith.
The 1960s brought a wave of cultural transformation and a turning of the tides on the opinions of the government, with the civil rights movement and anti-war Vietnam sentiments shaping the national discourse. The Tinkers embraced these changes, believing that students had a role to play in advocating for peace and justice. However, their stance on war was not without controversy. While many in the community supported their activism, others saw their views as unpatriotic, reflecting the societal divisions of the time.
As the Vietnam War raged on, anti-war sentiment grew across the U.S., with protests like the Washington Peace March becoming commonplace. Inspired by Senator Robert F. Kennedy's call for a Christmas truce and the growing wave of student activism, a group of Des Moines students organized a silent protest against the Vietnam War. The symbol of the protest? A simple black armband, an act of peaceful defiance. 13-year-old Mary Beth Tinker was among them. After much discussion and initial hesitation from their parents, the Tinker children were granted permission to participate. Their father, Leonard Tinker, concerned about possible repercussions, ultimately supported their right to stand up for their belief.
He said, that we shouldn't necessarily wear those black armbands. It's against the rules, and the principals don't have such an easy job. But my brother told him, well, Dad, this is just a little black piece of cloth, and people are dying. And we feel really strongly about this. It's our conscience. So we knew that our dad really cared about using your conscience. And he had said that he was in that some of his friends had been in World War II and had died. And he took us to the graveyard where his friends had been buried from being in World War II. And he said, if we don't speak up and use our conscience, we could have the Nazis in charge.
Students from the Unitarian Youth Club, including John and Mary Beth Tinker, gathered at Christopher Eckhart's house to discuss the protest in greater detail. 2 days later, word of the planned protest reached Des Moines school officials. In response, school principals announced a policy banning armbands, warning that any student who refused to remove one would face suspension.
December 16, 1965, Mary Beth Tinker entered the school with a black armband on her sleeve. At first, no one seemed to take much notice. She made it through most of the school day without issue until she arrived at math class. The teacher spotted the armband and handed her a pink slip, and was sent to the principal's office, where she was asked to remove her armband. Fearing suspension, Mary Beth complied, took off the armband, and returned to class.
Next day, John Tinker wore his own armband to school, while the family friend, 16-year-old Christopher Eckhart, wore one at a different school. Both students were confronted by school administrators and ordered to remove the armbands. Unlike Mary Beth, John and Christopher refused.
He knew about something called civil disobedience, which I didn't really understand. But civil disobedience is when you see a rule or a law that you think is unfair or immoral, you break it, and you're willing to pay the consequences. It's got to be something nonviolent.
The Des Moines School District enforced its new rule, targeting the students' protest. John and Christopher, standing firm in their beliefs, were suspended, though Mary Beth had removed her armband the previous day, which according to the school's rules, she should have been free of trouble, was also suspended for participating. Their suspensions would last until they agreed to return to school without the armbands. Rather than backing down, the Tinker family and Christopher Eckhart decided to fight back. Their silent protests had sparked a legal battle for students' free speech that would change the United States forever.
The Tinker family began to look for a way to fight back. The petition was seen by the ACLU, and they were interested to help. They sent them a lawyer to be represented by Dan Johnston. Dan Johnston was new to ACLU, and Tinker vs. Des Moines was one of his first cases. Johnston argued that the school's suspension of the students was unconstitutional and infringed on their First Amendment right. The school argued that the wearing of the armbands would disrupt learning from the students. The law, it seemed, was not on their side at first. After losing at the U.S. District Court and facing a tie vote at the Court of Appeals, the Tinkers appealed to the Supreme Court, who took the case due to the fact that other courts in the U.S. had rules that differed from the other ones in the other district courts. For this reason, they appealed to the Supreme Court, and the case was taken.
The Supreme Court ended up ruling 7-2 in favor of the students, stating that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedoms of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. The court found that the armbands were a form of symbolic speech and did not cause substantial disruption, making the school's actions unconstitutional. This case set a precedent for students' free speech rights in schools, establishing that schools can only limit speech if it significantly disrupts the educational process.
The impact of Tinker vs. Des Moines extended far beyond the courtroom, as it reshaped the relationship between students and schools regarding constitutional rights. Before this case, schools had a nearly unchecked authority to regulate student speech, often silencing controversial, unpopular opinions. This decision not only empowered students, but also helped educators find a balance between maintaining order and respecting free expression. It made it clear that schools aren't just a place of authority, but spaces where constitutional values, like the right to peaceful protest, are protected. Tinker set a lasting precedent, showing that young people aren't just spectators in society, but active participants whose voice matter.
Recognized as one of the most important Supreme Court cases in U.S. history, Tinker v. Des Moines has been cited thousands of times in subsequent legal cases and lower court rulings. It has influenced key decisions in other notable student rights cases, such as Hazelwood v. Kohlmeyer, Bethel School District v. Frazier, and Mahoney Area School District v. BL. However, only one of these cases expanded students' rights. Hazelwood v. Kohlmeyer ruled that schools could censor student speech in school-sponsored publications if the content did not align with the school's values. Bethel School District v. Fraser reinforced the schools have the authority to restrict vulgar or lewd language. The most recent case, and the only one in the digital age, reaffirmed students' rights. The ruling established schools cannot punish students for off-campus speech unless it significantly disrupts school operations.
Beyond the courtroom, the ruling has inspired generations of students to stand up for their beliefs, from protests against war and climate change to demonstrations for racial and LGBTQ+ rights. Mary Beth Tinker herself has spent her time since educating students about their constitutional freedoms, reminding them that their voices matter.
The question of how far students' rights extends remains an ongoing discussion, particularly with the rise of social media. However, the core message of the case endures. Students are not merely passive learners, but active participants in democracy. In which students are informed about the benefits of peaceful protest even at a young age, and how, as community members, they have the right and moral obligation to speak up for what they believe is wrong and in need of changing in their community.
Tinker vs. Des Moines also highlighted the different rights and responsibilities of the school and the student. The students, if they feel they have a moral responsibility to protest what they feel is not fair, they have the right to do so, as long as it does not infringe on the rights of others. While the case makes it clear that schools cannot suppress their rights given to the students by the Constitution, the school still has a responsibility to make sure that any form of protest that happens on school ground remains peaceful and not distract other students from learning and studying there.
Ultimately, Tinker v. Des Moines helped establish an unprecedented impact on the students' rights in the schoolhouse, as well as giving students the right to express their moral responsibilities through peaceful protest, while also making sure the school's boundaries in these situations are known and followed. The school should know that they have to carefully maintain the learning environment. When students' First Amendment rights are respected by both other students and the school, then freedom of speech can thrive.
The Tinker case and the Tinker ruling has defined my life in so many ways. I had no idea that that was going to happen, but I'm grateful because I like young people and I like to hear the ideas of young people, and I think it's very important for our progress that young people are respected and that their ideas are listened to. And so the case and the ruling have been so important in my life, and it's really enabled me to speak with young people all over the country and sometimes even in the world. And I'm very grateful for that. If I can play some part in empowering young people to take our world forward, to take our country and their communities forward and their schools, I'm very grateful for having a part in that.